Welcome to ProgrammingKT. I am explaining about the concept is forEach method. So forEach method was introduced in Java 8. So before JDK 8, to access elements from any input source like array or collections, we can use traditional for loop, right? From 1.5 onwards, we can use enhanced for loop also. So in JDK 8, forEach method was introduced to access the elements from input source like collections, array or streams by using for each method. So I will write an example without using for each method, by using traditional for loop. Then I will write the same example by using with for each method by using functional approach. So then you will get some clarity. So before that, first I am trying to create one input source. I am trying to create here list of strings. I am trying to provide some programming language names. So I am taking exactly 5 elements. So I am renaming like list. So how I can access elements from list before JDK by using for loop. So for loop have three parts, right? Initialization, condition, increment or decrement. So first part will be the initialization. From where onwards, you want to iterate. What is the starting point? So I'm trying to iterate from 0 onwards. How many times? List of array size. That list size. Second condition will be the conditional check. Third one will be the increment part or decrement part. Here I am trying to increment from 0 to end of that list. Next, here I am trying to build a simple logic like printing. So how we can access elements from list by using get method that exists inside list. So once we provide index number to that get method, it will return that corresponding element. So this is the traditional approach, accessing element from collection input source. So let me try to run. So I am getting the elements one by one from that input collection. So if we can observe here typically, so for accessing one element, one unit of work is required. So total here 13 units of work is required. So I will explain. So first time, if you know internal working of for loop, so initialization will be executed only one time. Next one will be the conditional check. So for accessing 5 elements, 5 times conditional check will be happen, right? So what's the element in first conditional check? If it is true, print the element. Next time will be the increment. So for accessing one element, one conditional check, and moreover that one increment. So once the element is printed, then it will increase anyway. So for accessing 5 elements, 5 conditional check, 5 increments. Moreover that once the last element is accessed one more time, it will be increased, right? Then condition will be checked, condition will be false. So for loop will be terminated. So for 5 elements, 5 times will be printed. One last case will be that one also I am trying to consider. So in that case, 6 conditional checks, 6 increments. So exactly 13, right? So this is the problem with the traditional for loop when you are trying to iterate from begin to end. So if you are trying to iterate begin to end, so these conditional checks we can reduce. That's why in JDK 1.5 they introduced enhanced for loop. Instead of checking, instead of conditional check and increment every time, so our target is accessing elements from begin to end. So there is no need to check the condition, right? If a requirement is, if you want to iterate a specific number of times, in that case for loop is, traditional for loop is recommended. Moreover that increment part will be +2, +3, +4, depending on our requirement. In that case also for loop. Moreover that initialization also from index 1, index 2, index 5. So depending on our requirement, in that case also for traditional for loop. So if you want to iterate whole array from begin to end, in that case traditional for loop is not recommended. Instead of that, enhanced for loop from JDK 1.5 onwards. So how enhanced for loop will work? First we need to provide a data type and variable from that input source. So here input source will be the list of strings, right? We are trying to access elements inside that list. So all these are the strings, right? That's why we need to provide corresponding data type, variable name and input source. Next, we can print the elements inside that list. So now let me try to write one separator here. I can say Java 1.5 above 1. Initial version of Java. I can write it as a 0. Now let me try to. So I got the same result anyway. I mean from end to begin. Moreover that if we can observe here, from 13 unit of work to we can reduce to 5. So definitely it will be the recommended, right? Anyway, by using small number of input size will be even 100 and 200, there is no difference. So when you are working with large amount of data like in thousands and lakhs, in that case you can observe the delay, I mean between normal for loop and enhanced for loop. So if your requirement is iterating whole array elements from, I mean array or collection elements from begin to end, in that case enhanced for loop is recommended. So if you want to iterate elements specific index onwards or up to somewhat, I mean instead of iterating whole array over collection, up to somewhat if you want to trying to iterate, normal for loop is recommended. So now let me jump into our actual concept called for each method. So if we have collection type, I mean collection reference, directly you can apply for each method. So for each is expecting consumer as a parameter. Moreover that, let me show you the documentation about for each. So for each also internally uses enhanced for loop. So for each method is expecting parameter type of consumer. If you don't know what is consumer, I mean consumer is a functional interface. It is accepting any kind of data, and moreover that it won't return any result, returns no result. So if you don't know it, I already make video on it. Watch that, you will get some clarity. So it is from 1.8 onwards. So for each method exists inside iterable class. For each method is a default method. So this is the documentation about for each method. So it is expecting consumer, right? So you can declare one consumer functional interface implementation consumer of type string action. So here I can provide that action, I mean action reference. So this is from 1.8 onwards. Now let me try to run. I got the same result from 1.0, 1.5, 1.8. So with by using enhanced for loop, I mean we need to depend on for, I mean this kind of keyword and some structure 2 to 3 lines here it will be there, right? So by using, I mean for each method you can write in single line. So for understanding purpose I make this line into separate. Instead of that you can directly replace your consumer functional interface implementation logic with directly here like this. It will also work, no problem. So I am getting the same output, there is no difference. So comparing anyway for each functional for each method internally uses enhanced for loop only, but it is the functional style approach instead of traditional approach. So this is the difference between accessing elements with using for each method without using for each method, traditional for loop. So here I am trying to consider the logic, example is by using list, right? For array also I can write one example. So here I am trying to create one integer type of array. So I have array of 5 integer elements. I am trying to access one by one by using for each method. So first I need to create, here I am trying to take input source is the stream for that for each method. So to get stream I am using arrays utility class. Arrays of arrays dot stream of integer type of array, then I will apply for each method. So here this is the integer type of array, right? That's why int consumer is expecting. Int consumer is the special case of consumer. So if input data type is integer, we can use int consumer. So here I am trying to print it, or I can write method reference directly. Now let me try to run. So I am accessing the elements one by one by using for each method. So moreover that here input source is stream. So from that primitive type of array I am trying to convert by using array start stream. To provide input type is the stream of integer to for each method. So now I covered input source is the list. I am trying to apply for each method. Next one will be the stream. So I can apply stream, a map set also. So let me, anyway you can apply here, you can replace it with set, it will work as it is. So map is the different, somewhat different, right? It can store values like key value pair. So let me try to write example for map. So map of key will be the string. I am trying to provide values like value is integer. Next one will be b. So this is the map data, and I am trying to assign to variable. So how I can apply for each method for map. So map is the special case, right? Map dot for each. If we can observe here, for each is expecting by consumer. So for each method by consumer means consumer special case. Moreover that by means to. So here parameters will be by consumer. By consumer expecting, it is accepting two type of input values, like if I can write lambda expression, first value, first parameter will be key, next one will be the value. Now let me try to print that key value pair. So if I can write key here, next one will be the value. So this is the for each method, it says by using map. This is the for each method, right? Now let me try to run. So here I am getting the result, right? So anyway order is we can't predict, right? Depending on hashing logic it will work, it will store. So this is the says about for each method by using map. So if you learned something new from this video about for each method and moreover that internal working of for loop, hit on like button and subscribe Programming KT. Thanks for watching.